Welcome. Thank you so much, Maria Bucci, for joining me on this interview. I really appreciate you taking the time. And can you just provide me with a little background knowledge on yourself and your practice?
Yes, I first started out as a, third grade teacher in Dublin, school district, and taught third grade for 5 years and loved it and thought there was a lot more mental health issues that were kind of on the undercurrent of some of my students. So it really helped me to kind of address those before their school day got started in order for them to, be able to perform during the school day.
Right.
And usually it was about divorce or moving and things that kids didn't have any control over, especially because their families were going in all different directions. So for me, that was more important than them getting, a math lesson or a literature lesson. So I ended up doing my clinical license at University of Dayton and being a guidance counselor after my kids were born, and worked in schools and loved it. I worked at Hilliard Horizon in Hilliard for
Okay.
I think about 2 or 3 years. I can't remember exactly. It's on my resume, but I also then decided that it wasn't enough after I saw the groups that another social agency was doing. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do school guidance counseling lessons. I wanted to see the kids that were really having
Dig deeper.
the dig
Awesome.
deeper lessons of like child abuse. There was sexual abuse, there was divorces, there were so many things that happened, and social services would come in and they would take over, where I'm like, but those are, I felt like those were my kids.
My
Like
kids, I want to take care of them. Yeah.
yes, I want to
Yeah.
take care of them and I wanted to see it till the end and I was an advocate for them, but then here they got transferred to somebody else. So it's like a system instead of it being streamlined for them, and how hard it must be for them to be able to trust an adult.
Yeah. And as soon as they start to trust you, they're transferred to somebody else and have to rebuild. That's hard. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I ended up doing groups and getting my license and doing social work counseling through Northwest Counseling, which is now Centero, for I think about 7 years. And then I wanted to go back and again, reinventing ourselves. I loved it. And I love working with the guidance counselors, and they were wonderful as far as like trying to tell me it was like a grief and loss group. It was a divorce group. There were so many kids suffering in a school system without any resources whatsoever. And so I decided to do my own practice and then open it up to children, especially. I still do very reduced rates right now for kids because parents can't afford it. And I want to do that for them when they're struggling through, whether it's learning about ADHD or parents getting divorced or a death of a parent or a grandparent or a sibling. So that was my purpose, is to be able to
You want to
create.
help people and pay it forward and share your knowledge.
Yes.
Exactly. That's why I got into this area too.
And I know you and I are very kindred spirits in that arena.
Yes. Um, so of the family counseling, is there a special area or a group of people that you ideally like to focus on? I know you have women's workshop, you have children, you have families. Is there any that you really identify with or have a passion for over the others?
That's a great question. I think it's a three-part process. I think women suffer when they're getting divorced, especially if there's a betrayal. So I like working on that end. I like working with parents that are struggling with maybe their child's behavior. And since I've seen it in a classroom, I'm able to help them in that arena. But it's also like individually, if it's something that it could be a grief and loss, or like somebody died, or a child's acting out. And that's exactly why I got into counseling, because I won't divulge his name, but it was a boy in my third grade classroom when I was teaching, and his behavior was so crazy when he would come into my classroom and he would throw chairs, and it
My,
was in Dublin, that's not like something that usually you see. So he was telling me, he's like, I'm from Michigan. I don't want to be in Ohio. My parents got divorced and that's why I'm here and I don't like you. So Most parents, most teachers would go, oh, well, that's a behavior issue, but it's really, it's a grief issue. A
Mhm.
child's learning about
He
what,
lost his community, what he knew.
yes, and also lack of control.
Mhm, mhm.
So when I work with divorced groups, it was always what the kids can control about where they're taking their things back and forth from one parent to the other. And I still have my lovely art paintings from some of them that would tell me what it would be like from one parent's house to the next. So I think to be an advocate for children is the most important thing because they don't have a voice. It's not their decision.
Right, right. Each divorce and family situation is unique. If there is one thing you could change or one thing you'd like to tell people that they're just maybe considering divorce or not really sure where they're headed, if there is there any advice you'd like to give them?
Actually, I'm doing it right now with a couple that's got 5 children. They have 5 children, and one is 9, and the other one's at Ohio State that's 23. So that might be probably the progress that's going down the road. But what we decided is what's best for the kids. And I
Mhm.
think they have to disseminate what is best for the children first and how they want to see a relationship between mom and dad moving forward and not just what's happened in the past.
Well, and when there are children involved, you're going to be involved with your ex for a long time with your children, even when they're adult children, if they have grandchildren, you're going to
Forever.
still, as much as you might not want to, you got to think about after the divorce.
Mm-hmm. It's not only not after the divorce, but also not looking at if it's not culturally acceptable sometimes,
Mhm.
and to say what's best for the children and what's best for you. Like everybody's happiness is an inside job, and you want to model
I
happiness for
like
your
that.
children.
I like that a
So,
lot. Um, I can only imagine the benefit of somebody going through divorce to have a strong divorce team, to have a counselor, to have a financial advisor, to have an attorney or a mediator or a coach. What do you recommend people look for in those people that are going to be part of their team? Because it's a very important team and it takes a village or it takes a team. So is there anything
oh,
you
absolutely. And not only that, but when people file for divorce, what is the most important thing is to get a mediator that understands both sides. I'm seeing that there's a lot of conflict, and then they will contact me as a therapist, which is great to get your children in therapy. That is the number one thing. They want to see that you're trying to help your children through this difficult process. And when you're doing that and you're the advocate for your kids, mediators will definitely kind of look at your into what you're saying into consideration.
are you familiar with collaborative divorces?
I have been involved with some of those
I mean, because
issues.
that's when a mediator is involved oftentimes, or a family
Yes.
coach.
Mhm.
And, almost half of the divorces are pro se or don't involve attorneys. So it's very important to
Mhm.
have a mediator, a coach, someone that can work through things and is knowledgeable.
And also to also have the voice of the kids. You're right. And if they're old enough to speak, which some of my clients in family therapy have been old enough, they haven't allowed them to really, they are now saying their piece.
Good, good.
So I think it's really important once you're above the age of 13 that you could speak privately to a mediator and be able to have it be confidential in a courts, like in the court system,
Right. And say what you want.
and say what you want.
Do you have a most memorable case in the past that, that just sticks with you, whether it was positive or negative, that just really impacted you?
I do. I think about a mom who wanted the best for her children, and the dad impeded every single positive thing that was trying to be created into the children's lives by, and what I mean by that is she would try to move them into a school district that was were really conducive to getting them scholarships. They were very athletic, and dad didn't, he almost like wanted to put them back into isolation, and actually lied to the courts about where he was living, and they found out about it, which was wonderful, because it ended up, really hurting him in the end, because he was hurting his kids.
Yes,
And they're very successful now.
that's awesome.
And
So
they would come
they
and they would,
thrived in spite of it, and probably
yes.
because of that mom, that she was an advocate for her kids.
Yes, and she fought, and but he wouldn't meet with me, but she would bring them all the time to see me regularly, just to make sure that there were things that maybe she wasn't able to know, or
Mhm, mhm.
because some of the behaviors that were going on at the house. I mean, the things that the father would do that people wouldn't believe from a 13-year-old would be like cutting his hair like right away when he got out of school, and not telling his mom, and shaving it off, and making him do certain things that were so
Degrading, mortifying. Yeah,
traumatizing to
yeah,
children. Yes. And also not, so he would lie and say that, and she would, I loved it that one of my clients, who was a girl, would tell me, that was his sister, would say, and he wouldn't even buy a shower curtain so I could take a shower. And you're like, none of us would know that.
no,
And
no. And the
so
mom would not know that because she wasn't there.
yes, exactly.
Wow.
So I think the process of having someone safe and trustworthy to talk to, and then being able to address the parents in a very, I think, insightful way, will, because both of them in the end really want the best most of the time.
Right,
But
right.
this
Just in
guy,
different ways.
yeah, in different ways.
Well, I really appreciate you talking with me, and we'll share this on social media and YouTube, and I'll give you a copy. If someone wants to contact you, is there a website or an email or phone number? How do you prefer they contact you?
I'm really more like texting, and like but I want them to see my website, because it's like tells the story of my journey and who I am as a person and as a therapist. But it's www.wholeheartedworkshops.com and
Wholehearted Workshops.
.com. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks for inviting me.